Hi there. This is question and answer for week 4, I believe, of the Spring 2021 Pianimals Institute. We have a couple of questions today. One from Elsa Pecour, who says that I noticed that my left hand wrist is stiff and constantly higher than the hand arch, the MCP joint. So my understanding is that the wrist should normally be lower. Is this the case? When would it be appropriate for the wrist to be higher? What can I do to relax and lower the wrist? She rephrases it because those questions were from last week and I never saw them. So the left wrist is fixed and stiff and it's trying to stand the hand in a good structure, but it stiffens the wrist instead of the MCP joints to create the correct angle. The solution is probably to activate the MCP joints and try to keep the wrist in a neutral but flexible position. Is this correct? Are there specific exercises for that? So yeah, you've perceived the problem and also pretty well understood the problem. So basically, if there's any stiffness in the wrist, it's generally there's not enough activity in the hand. So if my hand just doesn't do anything, then my wrist has to come up here and hold it in its right position. So if my hand just simply stands up, my wrist can now be in the middle. Now it could still stiffen, but because basically if the wrist stiffens when the fingers do this whole finger flexion, for instance, that's simply undifferentiated effort. So that there's effort in the MCP joint where you want it, and that effort bleeds into the wrist and everything just stiffens. So the art is to stand, like try doing a whole finger flexion, and then while keeping this arched shape, moving the wrist up and down in a kind of a breathing situation. Breathe up, let it go even higher than the knuckles, but then let it come back down again. Let it come down all the way here without collapsing. Now, and if you do this breathing motion really small, while really firmly standing, either on one finger or on several fingers or on all 5 fingers, when I really say, okay, I'm going to breathe my arm light as a feather, sinking down as light as a feather, keeping this hand in its structure, keeping the hand in its structure, keeping the hand in its structure, keeping the hand in its structure. I can even go a little bit left and right, keeping the hand in it. I can do little circles. Oh my God, the dreaded wrist circles. Yeah, but if you're doing it in the context of cultivating a differentiation of effort, there's high effort in the hand-hip joint, and there's the only effort is the mental, physical effort to let go of the wrist. So we actually cultivate a movement that helps that wrist let go. Breathe. And mostly if you do that at first, you'll notice it goes down or goes up in hitches. So then you just go between 2 hitch points. Just breathe in a tiny bit. Look, let my body go the other way so that somehow the sense of an in-breath is a sense of release. And let my body go the other way so the sense of an out-breath is mitigated by the body. The body breathing in while the wrist breathes out. The body breathing out while the wrist breathes in. And did you see my elbow let go? Did you see my shoulder let go? So what this does is makes the wrist more intelligent. I can lie down altogether. I can just do that. Now the wrist is lying down and the heel is gently rooted in the piano, so that now, my hands are moving and my wrist is stable and neutral, but the stability that doesn't come from stiffness, it comes from being supported by an external physical object, yeah? So then the wrist can feel stability without having to stiffen, which is a wonderful experience for it, and also an educational one. And this sense of being stable without stiffening can then inform what it's doing when it floats off the surface upon which it was lying. So, yeah, try that out as a first attempt to educate the wrist in terms of differentiation. high effort in one part of the system with continuing low effort right next door. Now, the second part of the questions, are there situations where it would be appropriate to keep the wrist flexed and the MCP joints almost straight? That is, playing with the hand hanging from the wrist. Yeah, of course, why not? Big, loud chords, for instance. Basically, the louder the sound, the higher the wrist needs to be. For soft sounds, I can play up to about mezzo piano, keeping the wrists very low. But did you see when I went to mezzo forte, even the wrist is already high. Because now the larger bony structures, the forearm bones, are needed to help with the sound. They're not pushing the keys down, but they're providing structural support for So they're providing structural support for the movement of the fingers. When the fingers movement becomes more vigorous, you need to feel the skeleton through to the larger parts more palpably. So yeah, I mean, you know, I love to rant and rave about how, you know, don't invert. Now this is bad because now my MCP joints are inactive. They've just gone to sleep. Now the wrist is trying to do their job. No, I don't sanction that at all. No. If the wrist comes up high, the keystone of the arch, which it becomes the keystone of the arch, but the secondary keystone, the MCP joint, still maintains its viability and its integrity. So, you know, the best example of this is my own book, where I spend the whole first part saying that the MCP joint is the keystone of the arch, and then I put a picture in there, a drawing of my hand, where the wrist is quite clearly higher than the MCP joint. But in that drawing, you can see the MCP joint is still working very well. It is still structurally potent. Great. Now let's move on to the other question for this week, which is from Joyce. A couple of weeks ago, you talked a bit about the idea of standing up rather than falling down when playing the piano. Could you say more about this idea? Yeah. The weighted technique means bring the weight of the arm in. And bringing that weight of the arm in like that forces the hand to find its structural integrity and potency, the power of its own structure. If you do that weighted touch without the hand finding that structural integrity, you're gonna hurt yourself a lot really fast. And many people who develop tendonitis do so for exactly that. They use the weight and they don't carry the weight with the hand structure, therefore it all goes into wrist tension, forearm tension, the forearm flexors, yeah? And then, of course, they try to release the tension. Yeah, but you should never have, it never works, because some tension, residual tension always stays, and you never should have created that tension in the first place. You should have been standing and walking well. Well, look, when I stand, there's already an up right there. Did you see it? I used a lot of weight in this case, but there was an up in the hand's hip joint, the hand's metacarpal phalangeal joint, exactly where it needs to be to keep you healthy. So basically, the idea of moving a finger, if you move the finger in mid-air, that happens, yeah? Move the finger in mid-air. If you now attach that finger to an object, the same movement will create a standing action in the hand. The movement of the fingertip down, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, will cause the hip joint of the hand to rise. This is exactly the same as in sitting. I'm going to move my foot down. Oh, the floor got in the way. Look what went up. Everything. Everything. Now at the key does go down 9 millimeters. But in order for that not to create a shock and create a sort of attack, which is ugly, the listener actually feels attacked when you do that, there must be a compensating movement. Now they talk about shock absorption with the wrist, which is completely the wrong way to do it, because not all of the shock is absorbed. There's still a down, and then after the down has hit the piano, then you absorb the shock. No. There should never have been any shock in the first place. The judicious up movement, the apposite up movement, neutralizes the shock as it's happening, you understand? So that's why the up is so important. Yeah, the fingertip went down, but everything else went up. Just as my feet are going down, if there was a key there, then my feet would go down 9 millimeters while the rest of me was standing up. Feldenkrais said that we could perfect this active standing. We don't do it very well. He said that you should be able to put 2 scales, bathroom scales, underneath your feet and get up without the weight of the scales changing, the weight that the scales register. Now that's obviously impossible, but what was he getting at? He was getting at that it should just be a skeletal unfolding. There shouldn't be a sense of weight and struggling against gravity. You're within the field of gravity and you're just unfolding. Yeah? So that's why I can do this. I just unfolded my finger and everything else followed. So I like to say the biggest illusion in piano playing is that the key goes down. I love speaking in riddles, but when you perceive the key to go down, something in you will follow it down. And when you perceive, oh, the key's not going down, I'm just wiggling it, that allows you to stand up with impunity, you see? Everything that I did to wiggle that key had an equal and opposite reaction, and actually the reaction is more than equal, because the key went down 9 millimeters, but my wrist and my hand moved more than 9 millimeters. Yeah. So you see, my wrist is going up, but actually, if I keep the effort of the standing effort in the hand itself, then my wrist goes up, but my shoulder doesn't rise. When my hand does not stand up enough, my wrist will go up and my shoulder will rise too. So when the hand stands up enough, yeah, the wrist follows normally, but the shoulder lets go. So when the shoulder lets go like that, oh, and then I can go through to the entire body. That's all because the hand did its standing thing, which, we have so many different ways of perceiving or experiencing or explaining that, because so many people have so many different ways of perceiving. So we will go lie down, do an amorphous amoeba melting into the keys to eventually stand. We'll say inflate the balloon. We'll say imagine a jet stream of helium pushing up the middle of the hand. We'll say, oh, imagine pulling yourself up a ladder. Because so many people are coming from so many different backgrounds, so we should have as many ways of explaining this as there are people. But the underlying idea is that, yeah, you don't shock absorb, you neutralize the down before it even happens. So a continuous balancing of the down and up forces is maintained. I hope that clarifies. It was just even more confusing now. Please reform your question and we'll try again. Second question. I've been experimenting with this and have discovered a tendency for my shoulders to rise. Oh, I already talked about that. For the muscles of my upper arms to contract as well as the muscles in my neck to contract. When I try to play using the image of up rather than down, I last about 3 or 4 measures before I become aware of contraction tensions in both my upper arms and my forearms. Okay, yeah, okay. So again, there's some of those contractions are good and some of them aren't. So basically, when I stand like this on key, there is some contractive energy within the hand itself, but that contractive energy should be robust enough. I don't like the word effortful, because any truly efficient movement will be perceived as effortless. Yeah, but there's a certain something. There's an action. That action should be healthy enough that it relieves the forearm of any stress. So the forearm stays, like I said in my film, as soft as a baby's bottom. However, the upper arm is another story. Because for instance, if you grab one key and kind of pull on it a little bit to stand up and sense here, you will feel your triceps contracting, and that's a strong contraction. Now, I like to tell the story of telling Camel about this, watching him practice in Florida, and he was in a t-shirt, it's a warm day, and I could see them like contracting as he's playing. It's amazing. I tell him, and he says, no, they're not contracting. And I said, yeah, put your hand here, and you tell me if they're contracting or not. And he was shocked, because literally every truly efficient movement will be perceived as effortless. So he did not perceive that, but it was going on. So that triceps contraction is good and necessary. Also, if you raise the forearm like this, you can feel the biceps contracting. But there's a little bit of that forearm caused by the biceps is already happening here. That biceps contraction is a large part of maintaining your sense of weightlessness and stability, and not sinking into a down. The biceps contraction is a large part of maintaining the up. Now, if those two areas, the hand and the upper arm, both those sort of contractive functions are really good, you should not be getting tension in your neck or the shoulders or the clavicle or the shoulder blade. Okay? So when I really stand my hand well, and I'll feel those contractions in the upper arm, both those are really, really good. I should feel a let go in my neck and in the shoulder. So, I don't know, I mean, we'd have to take a closer look at it, but that's the basic system, and maybe you can fool around with it and see if there's something lacking in the triceps, or something lacking in the biceps, or something lacking somewhere in the hand or the finger. And when you find that, and of course you see I'm rocking with my body as we did, or I can slide as we did. The sliding even is better for activating the triceps. All those things should help the shoulder and the forearm stay free. Actually, the forearm is not totally let go. There is contractions in the forearm, but because when you use your lumbrical muscle, the lumbrical is actually attached to the superficial and the deep flexors. So even if you're not curling at all, there will be some pull on the flexors in the forearm when the lumbrical does that. So that is another possibly confusing element. Yeah. I think I should just leave you with that much, and you tell me whether that was clarifying enough to actually address the problems that you're sharing with me. And that's it for this week. I would ask you, look, some of these emails are getting lost. Like whenever I get a question, then I put a star. This is Gmail. I hate Gmail, but I'm forced by circumstance to use it these days. I put a star next to it, and then I hit all my starred emails, and they should come up one in a row. But somehow Gmail puts something way down because it's attached to some other email because of the heading. So, from now on, when you send me a question, would you please put a new subject heading? Question for week 4 or question for week 5. Pianimals Institute, something like that, okay? That would really help me out a lot to make sure that I actually get to all the questions each week. Great. See you tomorrow.